Hi, KM.
Hi, Priya.
Great to see you.
Great to see you too.
Thank you so much for joining us. As you know, at Villgro Philippines, we are a gender smart incubator, and this is something that is very close to my heart personally, but also something that we've been working on over the last many years, and very recently collaborating closely with you at Ignite Impact as well.
Yeah.
Our work has really revolved around the central issue that is the gender finance gap. And how do we really create a level playing field for women entrepreneurs and those who are underrepresented, whether it's by geography or by gender or by not, coming from a fancy college or a famous last name. And so our effort really at Villgro through various initiatives has been thinking about how do we really make this ecosystem and the system of finance more equitable, more inclusive. And over the years, as you know, we've sort of set up multiple initiatives. Through our incubation programs, we have a mandate to support majority women entrepreneurs. We have programs that are dedicated to women entrepreneurs like V-Rise and In Life. But in every single program that we do, we sort of ensure that majority are women-led businesses. But we discovered along the way that that's not enough. We really have to focus on the next piece, which is unlocking capital for these women entrepreneurs. And as we started getting into that issue, that's when, we understood that it's highly complex, as we all know. And that's what's really set us on this journey of really understanding what is gender lens investing, what is feminist finance. And that's really what we hope to dive into today. So thank you for being here. But first off, maybe you can share a little bit about what you do, what is Ignite Impact, and what do you personally do at the fund?
Yeah, my pleasure. So Ignite Impact Fund is a Philippines exclusive impact investment fund. So that means we invest only in the Philippines, and we look for ventures that support the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. So I guess in our journey towards feminist finance or gender lens investing was in the same vein as yours, but we started out from the capital side. So we started looking at ventures enterprises in the Philippines that are working to solve the Sustainable Development Goals. And as we went through that journey, we also had a lot of learning, had a lot of insight into what's happening in the ecosystem. And one of those key insights is that we need to be investing more in women. Part of the work that we've done is to take a look at our portfolio and see how many women entrepreneurs are applying for funding, what are the barriers for them into getting through our own screening criteria, what are the barriers for them from accessing other sources of funding other than venture capital, what their journey has been in fundraising. And we've learned a lot from that. And so we made, I think this, at least I led this conscious effort for the fund to be more conscious of gender-based financing and to participate more in unlocking capital, as you said, for women. So basically, that's what Ignite Impact Fund is currently doing.
That's fantastic, because that's a kind of a more holistic approach than most. So happy to hear that, and hope to dive into that a little bit. I think for us, the learnings from running these programs led us to set up a platform called the New Shoe Network, which is really a community of women entrepreneurs, but with the mission really to help women entrepreneurs succeed on their own terms. Because I think very often the narrative of success is just around raising venture capital, or there's a certain type or profile of an entrepreneur. So we strongly believe that women entrepreneurs are not a homogeneous group, and so their ambitions are different, the type of business models are different, and to your point, like alternative, they need the diverse types of financing, and not just, the one that is focused on super high growth or hyper growth businesses.
High performance.
So in this journey, I think for us, what has been interesting is working with partners like you. So on one side, we have the community for women entrepreneurs, and we felt it was really important to also ourselves get into that gender lens investing piece and create financing vehicles that can do this, and which we've done, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But the other piece is really trying to bring investors together, like such as through the Gender Lens and Impact Investment Council, which has been great. So thank you for being a champion. And let's dive a little bit into what it means, right, for all of us as players to contribute into the gender financing gap.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess jumping off of the point with the Gender Lens and Impact Investing Council, I think that was pivotal for us and for a lot of traditional kind of venture capital firms or traditional funds to dip their toes into feminist finance or gender, and kind of be educated around the gender finance gap. I think more than anything, it's about learning about yourself, like learning about your fund, how your fund functions, and how whether it does or doesn't function for women, and why it's important for you to prioritize it functioning for women. So for example, in Ignite, one of our key insights was we were offering like the standard venture capital instruments like equity, convertible, and debt. And sometimes you have to get a little bit more creative when you're dealing with a woman-led venture, because they may not have access to securitize. They can't securitize their loans because they don't have assets, or their assets are named after their husbands, or sometimes you have to get creative in terms of mentoring them because they have issues around breaking the glass ceiling in their chosen field or in the particular sector that they're working in. So you have to kind of begin the journey, I guess, with an open mind and like a curiosity about why isn't it working for women? Why isn't it why aren't women more successful in accessing funding? If they have these really great ideas, because if you look at the ventures that are actually applying for funding, I would say a lot of them are women-led, but they don't get, there's a cap. There's a cap that they can't break through, and I think that cap is really that the same chasm that we, for example, think about when we think about tech ventures, that they fall into that, pre-seed to Series A chasm. That's kind of the same for women, but for women, it's getting your product into the market, right? That
so you don't have enough financing to get your product
to the market. So they remain kind of cottage businesses. They remain small, micro, and they go to that route instead of exploring how far or how big the business can grow. Like they don't even have that growth mindset because it's been kind of very deeply inculcated into them that this is how far you can go as a woman entrepreneur. So that's kind of disheartening. And I'm sorry for bringing the energy down. Yeah. But I feel like
it's the truth.
Yeah, but also I feel like as investors here, we have to be cognizant of that mindset and that fact, and assess the ventures with that in mind. Because if we don't see how they see themselves, it's going to be very difficult to assess how far they could grow if they could get over that mindset. They could break through that barrier.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's break it down a little bit into. Let's jump into. I think our ecosystem, has a tendency to. We have different phrases at different times.
Sure.
And so I want to get first, before kind of going deeper into the issues that you raised, let's talk about what is feminist finance, right? What does it mean? Maybe I'll let you go first, and then I'll share what is the definition for me.
For me, feminist finance, very simply, is capital working for women. So if you break it down, capital, right? The vast amount of money circulating in the capital market, working, meaning access for women. So for me, that's like very easily just the crux of feminist finance. It's just capital working for women.
Not that it just exists. Absolutely.
Yeah, not that it just exists. Yes.
So I just returned from a recent conference that was really talking about the same issue, feminist finance. So for me, I think agree with you. So feminist finance is really nothing but making the system of finance work for gender equality, and supporting, of course, women primarily, but all underrepresented groups. And it really is about using finance as a tool to create gender
Agreed.
equity and
Yeah,
equality. And I think for far too long, the system has been set up in a way that it is quite difficult to access. And maybe not in very visible ways. It looks like the products, there are enough products out there for everybody, but there are systemic issues. So feminist finance is really trying to change that system inside out to make it a level playing field.
I really like that. I like that it's finance as a tool to achieving gender equality, because I feel like other tools have been explored a lot, like education, training, etc. But I feel like finance as a tool to achieving gender equality isn't kind of talked about that much, at least.
Yeah, and it's an evolving field.
Yes, it's an evolving concept for sure.
Yeah,
as everything is ever evolving. Yeah, but that's really interesting. Thinking of finance as a tool, I feel like that's also something. There's also something to be said about policies around finance and policies around gender equality not really meeting or kind of agglomerating together. That we can maybe talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we were to say that, okay, there is the financial system, but if we break it up along sort of, sizes and the value chain of financing, when we look at microfinance, it has come a long way, and it, far more, I think, evidently supports women. In fact, a lot of microfinance institutions lend exclusively to women beneficiaries.
Yes.
And so to your point of, there is a level of stagnation for women-led businesses, is actually, it's quite clear, right? Because microfinance really the beneficiaries are women.
Yes.
But when we go to the next level, beyond microfinance, that's where the problem starts.
Yes.
So there's a lot of trust of women as, borrowers at this level. What do you think happens at the very next level?
At the very next level.
Why is there such a gap? Just immediately starting beyond.
Yeah, I feel like it's a two-pronged problem. Like I mentioned earlier, it's not many women entrepreneurs, even though they are successful in the microfinance level, trust that they can break through that barrier. Trust that they can raise X amount of funding and grow into X many cities or X many municipalities and bring their product or their service to this many more people, right? They don't kind of think that way. But also from the finance or the fund manager's side, there's also this lack of trust in women, lack of trust that they can perform as well as they've been performing in microfinance. And there's also barriers around, like I said, the instruments that we use around the kind of, I don't want to say common, but I guess, the common instruments that we use that don't really work for women. So if you think about like banks and the securities that they require, a lot of women don't have access to that. A lot of women don't have assets. A lot of women don't have, they don't even have social security numbers, but they're willing to explore getting those things. But the thing is, the managers often don't have the patience or maybe the mandate as well to keep exploring how to provide these funding, these services to these women at this level, because they get cut out or cut off or screened out on the basis of not meeting certain requirements. So, and then when you meet a woman entrepreneur who's also met another woman entrepreneur who has maybe tried getting funding from a bigger firm or from a bigger bank, and they exchange these kind of doomsday stories, the mindset kind of propagates, and
that's the primary narrative.
That the narrative kind of circulates, and that discourages a lot of women. So I think that's really part of the problem.
Yeah, I agree with you. We recently concluded a research. Thank you for being part of it. But I think, it really validated a lot of the things that you say. And a lot of the time, we put the onus on women entrepreneurs rather than the system of finance.
Yes.
And yes, absolutely right. Sometimes they're yet to there is a large number of women entrepreneurs who are primarily the majority business, for example, in this country. Are still unsure how to navigate, right? What is the right type of financing for me? Because the narrative generally just it's either banks or VC, and so there is, of course, those capacity issues. There is probably, like you said, a systemic sort of a constraint on, can I actually grow?
Yeah.
And then who's going to support me, or what are the
you?
resources that's going to allow me to get there? Absolutely. But just to your point, I think the research definitely has shown that there's definitely an intent from a lot of the, at least on paper,
Interest.
or there is interest,
Yeah.
even going by all of our members at GISC, there is genuine interest in supporting women, or at least being part of the narrative of genderless investing. But I think the idea of feminist finance is about, are we genuinely changing the structures or the power structures? So that means, as investors, are we willing to, look at our internal processes, like what you mentioned, right? Are we willing to look at our internal process to see if there are so many women entrepreneurs out there, how are they not showing up in our pipeline?
True.
Why is it that they're not able to break through?
Yeah.
And are we changing anything in our system, conscious or unconscious, to unlock that? And I think that means we all have to do a lot more work, I assume, as investors. And maybe that is, the incentive to do that. I think there is a challenge there. I think the second thing is that, unfortunately, I do feel that we're getting to a point where we are discounting, right? We're saying, okay, like we have X number, so kind of like a checklist, right?
Yeah, I was
it's
thinking
a checklist approach. Yeah. And I think we have a danger of sort of, I think what we were talking earlier, gender washing or impact washing. Because a lot of the time you can get away with just being the checklist. Okay, we have counted how many women co-founders are there, or in management, or there's so many on the board. But if there's like one woman on your board and there's no real change in the power structure, then the change is really not there, right? Or we have so many women in our fund, but everyone is really an analyst, not really decision maker in the fund. So these are systemic power structures that also need to be broken down or amended to make it more equitable. So I was very interested when you said that, that is an internal process that you went through. That's not very normal. So congratulations for being, being really a champion and really walking the talk. So what was that kind of approach for you in trying to say, okay, how do we become gender smart?
Oh, that was very painful, very difficult process. I think it comes back to what you said about using finance as a tool towards gender equality. For me personally, my journey towards becoming part of the investing community is to use capital as a tool for inclusive development, as a tool for improving the lives of Filipinos, right? Using capital to achieve the SDGs. And when we kind of like, okay, well, let's just be transparent with ourselves. Are we doing that? Are we using capital to improve the SDGs? That's where it really started. And then when we looked at, the process was really reviewing, like from the top down, our strategy and everything. We're still very much undergoing that process, because it has to be kind of periodic and it has to evolve as the company evolves. But you'll also see, like, I would say lines being drawn, like, okay, we can do this for feminist finance, but we can only do this much. There are like very real limitations based on the fund's current priorities, based on a fund's even based on a fund's limited partners or who's funding them, right? So there are a lot of agenda that you need to manage and priorities that you need to align. And it's kind of a miracle when you find that perfect alignment, that, okay, we're gonna push through and go through and prioritize feminist finance and do the following changes. And even if you, like you said earlier, even if you do just incremental changes, I think it matters in the long run, as opposed to not doing anything towards using capital for gender equality. Because if you do nothing, then you're essentially becoming part of the problem. So I would say the journey is really very difficult, is very painful, and it will force you to kind of look at the harsh realities of what you believe in as a person and what you believe in as a fund, as an organization, right? Do you truly believe that you can use capital to achieve gender equality, or are you just doing this in order to, as you said, tick something off a checklist and be called this and that, right? Is that really something that you want to do? Yeah. And if it turns out that your organization is only willing to do this, why is that? What's the reason for that? Is there a good reason? Is there a terrible reason? So you have to kind of uncover all of these things, because I feel like not just working in feminist finance, but working in impact finance, you need to be. I mean, I feel like you can't work in impact finance and not be honest with yourself, right? Because of all the impact washing that is going around impact investing and everybody kind of suddenly flocking towards this new concept. I feel like we have to hold the line and have integrity with how we do our work, because otherwise, how would our investors trust us? How would our enterprises trust us? So yeah, so it was a painful, still hard, still difficult journey, but eventually you have to trust that you're going to get there and keep the vision and the mission in mind.
Absolutely. I think
that's
brave, and I think it's really walking the talk. So congratulations on doing that.
Yeah. I mean, you have no choice. You have no choice but to do that.
To move the agenda forward.
Yeah, you have no choice but to do that, because if you believe in it truly, then you have no choice but to move the agenda forward, as you said. Yeah.
So that's exciting to hear what you've been up to at Ignite Impact and the strides that you're making, and genuinely starting with yourself, which I think is a great place. I really love that, and that's honestly the kind of journey that for me personally I've been on as well, is starting with our own organization and how do we apply a gender lens, how do we genuinely become gender smart in starting with our policies, how we run the design of our programs, how we're designing financing initiatives, and the external piece sort of later. So I'm really, congratulations on that. I just want to jump into and kind of just summarize some of the challenges that you raised and that we discussed. So of course, on the women entrepreneur side, we have to start with sort of the cultural and social context and the systemic patriarchal systems that have been in place. So where it is a challenge for a lot of women entrepreneurs, as you were saying, to kind of imagine what is that scale or what is that growth path. And you may not have a lot of examples of people who've done it, right? People who've come from your own background. And then there is, of course, genuinely a challenge in navigating the investment landscape.
Finance.
So figuring out what kind of capital is appropriate for you, because what you're seeing may not be what you think, can I actually get that VC to fund me? Or I don't have the collateral for the bank, for example. And I would say, I guess the third bucket is your own sort of understanding of when you get into those discussions, feeling the confidence of being able to execute a particular deal or the investment. And maybe even articulating like what is my vision and things like that, because of some of these structural issues. But that's, some of it women entrepreneurs can solve themselves, some they can't because it's systemic. But I guess we also have equally challenging pieces on the capital side, right? On the sort of supply side of the issue, which is not many investors with the formal sort of or embedded gender lens. There are no explicit sort of commitments or understanding maybe of how to approach that. Sometimes the checklist approach, as we said, is just counting the number, or kind of somehow kind of making sure that you're in that checklist, you're fitting it without genuinely changing the power structures, without changing the systems like what you were describing. What about issues like having female fund managers or decision makers who are actually deploying capital? Because that is also a gap in the ecosystem. I don't know, how do you kind of see it in our ecosystem?
Actually, oddly enough, I feel like there are at least a lot of fund managers that I've met who are female. But I feel...
So does that solve the problem?
It doesn't. It doesn't.
It's not just enough having women
fund managers. I feel like because they're also answering to the
same system,
to the system, which doesn't really prioritize, feminist finance. It doesn't really kind of give give way or give importance to funding women or funding women-led enterprises. It's just there's a lot of fund managers, and a lot of them are interested in doing the
like the gender
feminist, the feminist finance initiatives that have been floating around for a few years now.
Yeah.
And that's precisely why, at least on our end, we joined the Gender Lens and Impact Investing Council, is to learn more about different instruments, to learn more about other investors' struggles. And when we, as you know, when we get to talking about our struggles, it's really more of a systemic problem, because even when you have a female fund manager who may be interested in doing feminist finance, that manager will still answer to general partners, to limited partners, to maybe a DFI who's funding their fund, who may not share the same interest. And now it becomes that fund manager's job, task, personal mission to kind of convert and align all of these interests together. So I feel like there is also a lack of I don't want to say belief, but a belief from the top, right, that this could work. And that may stem as well from a parallel of women enterprises don't have role models who have raised X amount of funding from traditional investors. And traditional investors don't have a lot of examples of women-led enterprises, or enterprises that have come out of feminist finance funds that are really successful, that are kind of fit their models as well. So they don't really also have that vision of what could this look like, right? So I think that's
an important
also,
point. So we're saying that, of course, I think we need more women in capital, like fund managers, others who are really making decisions about financing. There are a few, and they are increasing in number. We need more, but that's not enough. I think the system of finance kind of needs to be reshaped, tweaked, and maybe expanded in a way to really add inclusion, right?
That's true.
As a genuine interest. But what you're saying is that it also needs to come from the asset owners and or government
top level
and philanthropy, who are maybe dictating what the intermediaries as fund managers and financial vehicles should do. All right, so that is a larger issue that needs to be addressed by others who can move power.
Very big issue,
Which is why I think fundamentally this is feminist finance is about change, creating that systemic change. It needs to change on, I think we need to create change across all of the levels.
That's true.
For it to become, for us to see the outcomes of what feminist finance can really
I
do.
truly believe that the way you do that is by cultivating relationships, right? Cultivating like professional friendships, like we do with the Gender Lens and Impact Investing Council.
That's right.
We can invest in inviting more traditional investors inviting asset owners in, to kind of just witness, what's possible for them in feminist finance, what's possible for them to do to close that, gender finance gap. And it's really important to cultivate those relationships, because I feel like that's where real change begins. Is when you get like a one-to-one with this person, with this asset owner, and you convert them in a way into believing that they might be able to do this, that there is support for them to explore this.
I love this professional friendship.
Maybe
that's what,
professional friendship.
Yeah, I love that. Yes. I think that's really beautiful. So I think let's spend a little bit of time on what is the solution.
Yeah.
I think we identified some of the challenges. But I think both agree that it is an exciting space and time where we are.
Very, very exciting.
Yeah. So what are some initiatives that actually could help build this field of feminist finance?
Well,
kind of how do we strengthen the systems change that we want to create?
Yeah. Well, I already mentioned the Gender Lens and Impact Investing Council, building these professional friendships. I truly feel they're the bedrock of collaboration.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you said the power in that is being able to kind of share as peers. How do we go through this journey of changing the system?
Yes. And that feeling that you're not alone. Like if you're failing a little bit and you're failing alone, that's kind of, make you miserable, make you really kind of just give up and return to like traditional traditional methods, what you're used to. But if you're undergoing this big change, you have that support system around you, I think you'll feel more brave in doing that. Another thing that's really important is to bring in, I would say, the non-traditional, or maybe parts of the ecosystem who we traditionally do not talk to unless we need to talk to them, like national government agencies and policymakers, right? Because we need everybody to get on board with pushing this forward. And as you said, I really am grasping into like using finance as a tool for gender equity, because I feel like everybody can understand that, you know, that gender equity is important. It's a priority for the Philippines.
That's
if you look at
no one will disagree.
No
that
one will
it's,
disagree.
It's important.
But exploring using finance as a tool, finance as the solution. I don't think like it's even in the back of their minds or even in the front of their minds.
You kind of see it that way.
To kind of see that, see it in that way, and support it in the way that only they can sometimes, right? So I feel like we need to also get out of our kind of comfort circles.
Like the echo chamber of just us.
Yes, the echo chamber of just us, and bring others into the fold that we might, you know, that might help forward the cause, I think.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. So kind of the professional friendship / the council, so learning from peers or investors, but also how do we expand that group and bring others into this conversation, which is something I think we've kind of touched on even as the council, but not really, you know, acted on it. But maybe now is the trigger point. I think another piece that we are working on is really using blended finance as a way to demonstrate instruments that, you know, is not the typical, because sometimes the cost of capital, especially for fund managers and others who are answering to some other principle, right? They've taken the money from somebody to deploy. And so to change those instruments might be difficult. So we've, as Villgro and as, you know, our investment impact pioneers, we've really tried to create a blended financing facility and using sort of blended finance, which is nothing but fusing, you know,
pooling this and that together,
philanthropic grant capital into sort of commercial capital, and trying to sort of use that as a way to take more risk and try to create more appropriate and tailored financing for the need that we see on the ground. And I think that's one way that we've been thinking about approaching it. But I think for us as a player intermediary who can see kind of both sides, that's why we have like the Women Entrepreneur Network and then the financing side. And trying to sort of connect, build these bridges. And that's the role that, you know, we can play as Villgro in trying to bring different groups together. And I think, I think it's a creating level playing field is a long-term
That's
play.
True. Yeah, it's a long-term
It's not
play.
an overnight, but I think we need to keep making faster strides because, you know, gender equality can't wait.
That's true. I mean, for Ignite, I guess that was part of the reason why we joined the Gender Lens and Impact Investing Council. But for our part, I think as part of the solution, since we're actively searching for enterprises that are contributing towards solving the SDGs, we started looking at a gender in all perspective. So looking at, all right, so this company is working on climate change solutions. How does gender factor into that? I feel like one of the problems or issues as well with feminist finance, I mean impact finance in general, is measurement and management and reporting of impact, and how you make that kind of easy and practical and meaningful for everybody, for all the stakeholders involved. So we've started taking that approach. If this company is working on climate solutions, how does gender factor into climate solutions? How do they affect gender equity in that area? And going beyond, do they employ women? How many women are in their board, right? So like thinking about, all right, so this solves, let's just say, the lack of forests. How do forests affect women? And going very deep into that research. Because I think it's important to realize that gender does underpin a lot of issues, right? A lot of the issues in the SDGs. You know that it's just one of the 17
Correct.
SDGs. But if you really open your eyes to it, gender underpins everything. Like in healthcare, which is my background, we know that a mother would often, like a mother's health is kind of the sentinel indicator for a family's health.
Yeah.
So if the mother isn't healthy, then you can kind of guarantee the kids aren't healthy, the other members of the family aren't healthy. And so taking that approach as well into screening and into monitoring, into measuring, I think is a practical thing that most funds can adapt and do. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's really important and probably the topic for another conversation.
Yes, for sure.
But the nexus of really gender, climate, health.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, there is a cross-cutting and intertwined impact.
As it is.
Right?
As impact kind of.
Can be. Okay. So just to kind of wrap things up, let's say moving forward, right? I think one of the things that's kind of challenging in any ecosystem is that, you know, there tend to be like buzzwords or a month like Women's Month where everyone's talking about this issue
and then nothing.
You wait for 12 months later to highlight the issue again. But I think for people like us who are working on this issue around the clock, let's say if there was a call to action to the ecosystem, what would that be? Maybe if it's to the investors or for the women entrepreneurs or asset owners.
Oh, well, I mean, if there's a call to action for everybody, I think I want to borrow like what you said earlier. Like, I think about gender equity. How is that important to you? Why is that important to you? Why is that important for everybody? And then think about finance, your job. Even if you don't work in finance, you know, funding, money, capital, as a tool in achieving gender equity. I think if you start thinking about it in that way, more innovative approaches, more innovative ideas are gonna come out of it, rather than thinking about it as a requirement or something that you need to meet, right? Something that is, or even, you know, even worse, something that's the new thing that you wanna ride. But think about gender equity. Think about gender equity. Why is that important? How can you make that happen using finance, right? Using your job, right? And if you think about it that way, even if you're an asset owner, fund manager, even if you're an entrepreneur, how can you make that work for women, right? So thinking about that way, I think is the most important thing. That would be my call to action, like.
So for all of us to think about it as creating gender equity.
Yes.
And how can what can you do in whatever role you are?
Whatever you are. Exactly.
As an entrepreneur, whether you're an intermediate, incubator, or fund manager, somebody who is the asset owner deploying capital. I think that's really powerful. Of just reframing how we think about it.
Yes, very important.
I think for me, just to talk directly for women entrepreneurs, it's really about maybe the pieces. How do you kind of figure out what's the appropriate financing for you? So that I think there's a lot of disappointment in the ecosystem, and especially for women entrepreneurs, because the system, you know, it's difficult to break into it. But I think maybe we can kind of reduce some pain if also try to see what is the most appropriate financing, because I think the narrative today is really primarily around VC financing.
That's true,
and we know traditional banks, it's too difficult. So really, I think the call to action for the other ecosystem players is to think about how do we create appropriate financing products.
Yes.
And for the entrepreneurs who are looking for financing, you know, to kind of try to mitigate that, you know, lessen their time in trying to look for funding to adjust to what's appropriate for you, because your business might never need VC funding.
That's true,
But that doesn't mean that there's nothing out there.
There's nothing out there for you.
There is other alternate. There are debt products. There might be angel investors who can do sort of more patient equity investments.
Definitely.
There might be other instruments like convertible, which might work for you. So I think it's hard to navigate, but I think kind of connecting with the people who can help you with that. And then for the ecosystem, I think we have a responsibility to, of course, tell more stories, rise,
lift up everybody
and tell the stories of the women who are doing amazing. And that success is not just a hockey stick. That it is
many
in all
forms.
If you want to build a business and leave it to your kids, that is also a huge success. And I think changing the narrative for me is kind of the call to action. And I think you can do it through many ways.
Really beautiful.
Stories, but through our own work, creating financial products, and for, I think, for women entrepreneurs, helping them find the kind of courage to figure out what is their definition of success, which is not easy.
Yeah, and they don't stop advocating for yourself, right? As a woman,
you are the best advocate for yourself.
You are the best advocate for yourself.
That.
That's true. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, KM.
No problem.
Great to see you.
Great to see you too.